Hello everyone, I'm George from Ireland. Behind me is the house where Sir Alan Patrick Herbert spent much of his life. I'm in Hammersmith, London, and the River Thames is just behind this house. So he felt that it soothed his soul to look out on to the placid waters of the Thames, though he was not an oarsman, I believe. Anyway, APH, he often wrote under those initials. He was born at Surrey, which is a county just outside London, to the southwest, into an upper middle class family. His father being high up in the India Office. APH was the eldest of three brothers. So he was academically precocious from his earliest childhood. He went on to Winchester College, which is one of the realm's most distinguished schools, and so Wykehamists are renowned for their intellectualism. And I remember Sir John Betjeman saying, Wykehamists like to unwind by composing Greek half-acrostics on the moving parts of their toy trains, and he was one of those. So he carried off a number of glittering prizes, like the King's Medal for English Poetry. Why English poetry? Doesn't that go without saying? No, because quite often they're composing it in Latin or Greek in those days at Winchester. And he got a prize for oratory as well. He was an outstanding footballer, he was a house captain, so a very distinguished schoolboy career. He had a prize presented to him by the then Liberal Prime Minister, Sir Henry Herbert Asquith, who'd also been to that same school. Anyway, but his childhood wasn't always plain sailing. When he was 8, his mother died of consumption. Anyway, then he got an exhibition to New College, Oxford, and New had a link to Winchester because New College, Oxford, his full name is the New College of St Mary the Virgin. Is it the New Winchester College or something like that, of St Mary the Virgin in Oxford? So both founded by William of Wykeham. That's why the boys of Winchester College are known as Wykehamists. So he went up to read Literae Humaniores, but he was miffed that he didn't get a first in moderations. So the exams partway through your course are called moderations, or mods for short. In those days you get a first class degree, a second class degree, a third class degree, a fourth class degree, or a pass. A pass is that close to failing, or else actually fail. All the others considered honours degrees. So it's not like in the United States where being an honours student is something a bit unusual. Virtually everyone's get honours, but we don't consider that special. We don't bang on about having an honours degree, it's just assumed that you do. So not much of an honour. Anyway, so he hit Oxford in a big way, speaking on the paper of the Oxford Union, that's the debating society of Oxford University. On the paperman, his name was actually on the order paper listing the people who are going to speak. So he was just a very gifted public speaker and very quick on his feet, could marshal his facts, speak on issues about like home rule for Ireland or whether there ought to be import tax. There's an issue called tariff reform. He was a free trader, and that was a sort of an article of faith for the Liberals. He never joined any political party, though. I don't think he was elected to anything in Oxford Union, though. I could be wrong. So he was dischuffed that he didn't get a first in classics mods, so decided to switch to law, and he got a high first in law when he graduated, and that was just before the First World War. But he went to Oxford House, which is some sort of charitable mission in Bethnal Green, an underprivileged area of London, to help the needy. Spent a year doing that, and by then the First World War had broken out, and he was at this stage he was a regular contributor to Vanity Fair and Punch and various other satirical magazines, because he was such a gifted writer. So God was almost prodigal in the way he blessed him with numerous talents. Anyway, so he volunteered for the Royal Naval Volunteer Reserve, and he had no experience sailing or anything like that, so he had to enlist as an ordinary seaman, an ordinary sailor. Now, in those days, very, very few people went to university. Not most people didn't even finish schooling, so his educational level was just sky high compared to the ordinary sailors, and I wonder if he got a bit of grief for that. Anyway, he was doing his basic training in the Royal Navy when he found out his brother had been killed in the First World War, and his other brother was also killed later on in the First World War. And he got engaged in 1914. He married the next year, and then he was dispatched to the east, fighting in the ill-starred Gallipoli campaign, or the Dardanelles campaign. And so they had more ships more sailors than they had ships with them. Some of the Royal Navy had to fight on land, the Royal Naval Division, and indeed he fought on land there. So he was no desk soldier. Had many hair-raising experiences. Later wrote an account of it, and because he had some knowledge of law, he was involved in some court-martial cases and felt that these were often unfair. His account of his time in the First World War was published right after the First World War and led to the court-martial system being reformed. Anyway, later he became adjutant of his battalion, which meant he was away from the front line and out of harm's way. And he stopped off at Gibraltar. He travelled around Spain a little bit during the First World War. He knew a lot of important people, was friends with Harry Macmillan from quite early on, who was slightly younger than him. Millen was born in 1894. Anyway, so next thing for A P Herbert, after the First World War, he got himself called to the bar, and then he practiced as a barrister, had an outstanding legal career, was making plenty of money, and 4 children quickly appeared. 3 daughters and 1 son, in that order. Anyway, he wanted to go into politics, and he finally got himself elected for Oxford University in 1935. So universities had separate representation until 1950. So if you were a graduate, and very few people were, you had 1 vote for the constituency where you lived and 1 vote for the university to which you formerly belonged. I didn't get to get back in person. So Oxford University had 2 MPs, Cambridge University had 2 MPs. I think all the other English universities together had 2, the Scottish universities had 2, not sure about the University of Wales. In Northern Ireland, the Parliament of Northern Ireland, Queen's University of Belfast had 1 in that Parliament, I don't think in Westminster. So it went like that because, of course, universities were like semi-independent of the state, goes back to when they were ecclesiastical institutions. So he was very broad-minded, he was a reformer. So was he closer to liberalism? Well, possibly. But he was supported by many people in the university. The Oxford Union sent us past motions in his favour. So elected in 1935, only re-elected in 1945. There was a 10-year hiatus without an election, and then 1950 they were abolished. So he'd been somewhat sympathetic to Labour, but was horrified by the attitude of the Labour government when it came in 1945. Felt they were too triumphalistic, mean-spirited and intolerant. So he clashed with George Orwell, who was a bit younger than him, and Orwell felt that he was really a fuddy-duddy in disguise, just like a Tory who wasn't open about what a reactionary that he really was. So he was a prolific writer. He wrote plays, he wrote film scripts, he often wrote the libretto for musical comedies, as well as being a prodigious producer of commentary in various magazines and newspapers, and novels as well, memoirs of his time in the war, and then these what's called uncommon law, these misleading cases as he called them, which was a sort of a send-up of law reports. In law they talk about leading cases, as in a very important case which would set the tone for how law develops thereafter. But this was the opposite. These were fictitious ones, so he wrote them just to cock a snook at the legal profession. But they were often mistaken for real cases, and he unwittingly duped a lot of people. So he was out of Parliament in 1950. By then he was slightly ailing, but he carried on in his usual waspish way as a gadfly man of letters, increasingly ill in the 1960s, and he liked to take the mick out of Harold Wilson and indeed Edward Heath, who were the leading politicians of the 60s and 70s. And he died in 1971, and he was writing even from his deathbed to various magazines, memorial services in St. Martin's in the Fields. He was commemorated in the United States Congress as well. I'm not sure where he's buried, but anyway, his legacy continues. His great-grandson is currently a Labour MP for Chesterfield. That's a town in Derbyshire, which was formerly represented by the late Viscount Stansgate of unhappy memory, who went by the alias Tony Benn. That is enough about A P Herbert, who sadly these days is largely forgotten, but deserves much wider recognition. So please follow me on Facebook, on Twitter, or on Instagram, if I ever get those ones going anymore, and book online lessons with me in history and politics, in English as a foreign language, English literature, English language, French, law, geography, religious studies. Choose me as your tour guide in London, and oh yes, I translate from French, Spanish, Italian, Romanian, German and Russian, especially legal documents. Anything else I do? Yeah, that's about it. Okay, toodaloo.